All right, welcome back. And now we're going to talk about the United States and how we were dealing with all of these things that were going on in Europe and changing at the time. So in the United States, we had kind of fallen back into isolationism. To most Americans, the threat of rising aggression from places like Germany and Japan seemed very distant, and particularly during the Depression when we had more pressing problems to deal with. Hitler had also more than a few admirers in the United States. Obsessed with the threat of communism, some Americans approved the expansion of German power as a counterweight to the Soviet Union, and some also embraced the anti-Semitism espoused by Hitler and his followers. And to give you a sense of that, I've got something to show you.
February 20th, 1939. Just months before Hitler invades Poland and ignites the deadliest war in history, thousands of Nazis gather for a rally at an indoor arena. But this isn't Nuremberg or Berlin. This is Madison Square Garden in New York City.
You all have heard of me through the Jewish-controlled press.
And the man speaking isn't a member of Adolf Hitler's inner circle. He's Fritz Julius Kuhn, a U.S. citizen and head of the German-American Bund, or association.
Kuhn wanted a rally to celebrate George Washington's birthday. The first American fascist is what they called him. They signed a contract with Madison Square Garden. Said, okay, we agree. No swastikas, no anti-Semitic signs, none of that stuff. Of course, once the contracts were signed, those agreements went out the window.
This program was produced for the German-American Bund rally.
We love him for the enemies he has made. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Fritz Kuhn.
Kuhn then went on to deliver a very, very predictable and very, very typical National Socialist stump speech about racism and the Jewish conspiracy and the communists and how everybody's an enemy and everybody has to be alike.
We, the German-American Bund, organized as American citizens with American ideals and determined to protect ourselves, our homes, our wives and children against the slimy conspirators and the parasite hand of Jewish communism in our schools, our universities, our very homes.
Then, an unemployed plumber tries to silence the American Fuhrer.
Isidor Greenbaum tried to rush the stage, but these guys beat him. It looked like an SS beating in the Berlin streets. His pants were ripped off. And the audience, of course, cheered at this. To see someone beaten up, had they known he was Jewish, they would have, probably even cheered louder.
All right. So, as you can see, there were some Americans who weren't all that against Hitler and his ideas. American business people didn't wish to give up profitable overseas markets in Germany and Japan, and many Americans were reluctant to get involved in international affairs because of the legacy of the First World War. Many were convinced that involvement in the First World War was a mistake. Ethnic allegiances also reinforced Americans' reluctance. Many German Americans and Italian Americans celebrated the expansion of national power in their countries of origins, and many Irish Americans were still strongly anti-British. Congress also favored isolationism as evidenced by various neutrality acts. Beginning in 1935, lawmakers passed a series of neutrality acts banning things like travel on belligerent ships and sale of arms to countries at war. The hope was that this would allow the U.S. to avoid the conflicts of freedom of the seas and things like that that had contributed to involvement in the First World War. However, the Second World War would come knocking on our door a little bit more personally than it did in the First World War. And so we're going to talk about the war itself in our next few videos.